And we're back. Welcome everyone to the second episode of the Not Another Interview Show podcast. I'm your host Tyler Green, and today we've got a really great show for you guys. Today I'll be sharing with you guys my interview with Mr. Adam Griswold, who is a very talented filmmaker from the Boston area, and we had a very good interview talking, just about his films, how he got his start, where he gets his ideas from, all that stuff, and it was very fun. So, yeah, thank you, Adam. It was great talking to you. But of course, before we get to that, I want to apologize for the delay in coming up with new episodes. I've just been really busy with, very busy with school, work, etc., and I'm actually just coming down from a cold, which you can probably hear in my voice. So, yeah, I have some guests that I've been talking to that I hopefully can get on the podcast, and we'll see where that goes. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I also want to give a couple shout-outs real quick, too. First off is my friend Snoops Q from Twitter, who recently put up a Patreon for his comics. He's a very talented artist with a good sense of humor, and I highly recommend, just giving him a few bucks, just support him and tell him Tyler sent you. And I also want to give a shout out to my new friend Wesley over at Viewers Productions. Viewers Productions is basically, a Defunct Land style YouTube show which goes over, obscure, nostalgic media, which is kind of in the same boat of what I'm trying to accomplish with, this podcast and everything. So definitely check him out. I'll give you guys the link to, his Twitter and, his YouTube videos in the description below. So with that all in mind, here's my interview with Mr. Adam Griswold. Hey everybody, today I have a really great guest with me. He's the creative force behind Smoking Bottle Entertainment, who's come up with movies such as The Cartoon Man, Space People, the upcoming Lights, Camera, Terror. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Alright, sweet. And the also upcoming Quirewood. Please give a nice welcome to Adam Griswold. Adam, how are you?
I'm doing great, yeah.
Alright, fantastic. Alright, so I'm going to start this off simple. So how did you get your start in filmmaking?
Well, it's like, it's like you go way, way back. Like I can remember, I feel like I had movies in my head, just as a kid. I'd be in kindergarten, elementary school, and my brother and we'd do stuff with toys, and then I just envisioned it cinematically. So it was really I really got started actually making films when I was in middle school, high school. My high school didn't really have much of a film program or anything, but occasionally I'd be in history class or English class. They'd assign a research project to research the Middle Ages or America in the 1920s, and then present your findings as either a PowerPoint, a live presentation, or a video. And I would do videos. I'd go all out and make narrative movies, and so from that I kind of really got into filmmaking. I also made some stuff with my family on summer vacations, and then I really like I said, I kind of always had movies in my head, always knew this is something I wanted to do, so I ended up going to Emerson College, majoring in film production. Spent 4 years there. It was kind of a mixed bag. The program was a little outdated, the curriculum, but then once I got out of college, I started working on some local independent films around New England, working as a production assistant and on crews and so forth. And then within a year, I started meeting people who also were interested in making films, and realized, I think I can do this. I can't do anything too big right away, but I could probably make a small short film. And so I started making short films, then progressed to slightly longer films, and now I've made a few features.
Awesome. What was your first movie?
That depends on what you count as my first movie. It's
anything counts, man.
Yeah,
anything.
I don't know. It's the first official Smoking Bottle Entertainment movie was the Dolchemog tapes, which was this found footage type movie that I shot in the woods with 3 other people. And then if you can go further than that. You could say the movie I made for my middle school French class, that could be called my first movie, which was a decade earlier. But it's it's
cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's, and even you can go back further than that. I don't know, just walking, but it's before that, just walking around the house with a movie camera, and then so it's, yeah.
Sweet, yeah, that's cool. So the first movie. So what was the first movie that you actually like helped out on outside of Smoking Bottle Entertainment?
Oh, like I don't know. There were a few. Because I mean, I was helping out on movies before there was a Smoking Bottle Entertainment, really. Um, I think the first one would have been it was this feature called the A Plate that was shooting in like Nashua, New Hampshire area. It was like through Emerson Colleges, had some job website that I worked as a PA on that. And that was actually a slightly bigger budgeted than most of the independent films I ended up working on. It had some actors in it who I couldn't even tell you their names, but they were like vaguely recognizable people who play supporting roles on TV shows. So they'd had kind of a budget.
Ooh.
I didn't.
Wow. Okay.
I still only got paid for some of my gas mileage, but yeah, I think that was the first one. Then there were a couple. Then I started working on some more that fall. This was like 2010. Then that was then in the summer. Then in the fall, I started working on some other films where I started meeting more people that I still work with occasionally.
That's great. I love that. Are these some of the people that show up in your movies?
Yep, in some cases.
Oh, sweet. All right, I like that. That's cool. It's great that you have that outlet. All right.
Yep.
So where do you find the ideas for your movies? Where do they come from?
Um, Really, it's hard to say. I honestly, coming up with ideas sometimes is one of the hardest things. It's
Oh God, I
or not so
know.
much coming up with ideas. I'll have a lot of ideas. The hard part sometimes is finding an idea I'm passionate enough about to follow it through and go through the whole process. Because
Oh God, yeah.
with some of these films, I'm looking at least a year. And some of them more recently have taken more than a year. I really need to know that, like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to be all in on this. So it's like I'll have an idea, but if it's not something I'm that wild about, I'm not necessarily gonna go forward with it. Really, it helps. What helps is when I know someone else is also passionate about the idea. So if someone else suggests, I mean, Space People, for instance, came from somebody just said, you should do a space movie sometime, which was actually kind of based on I'd done the Cartoon Man movies, which had all these, which I'm sure we'll talk about, had all these cheesy, low-budget special effects. And so, Rebecca, one of the actresses who's been in most of the films I've done, suggested I do a space movie. And literally the next day, this whole thing just kind of came to me that eventually turned into the script for the first Space People. Yeah,
Cool.
most of the main plot points, it was just within 24 hours of, hey, you should do a space movie, I had it.
And look how that turned out. Because if any of my viewers have seen the movie Space People, it's a very elaborate kind of space movie on like, so it's a la like trying to think, it's a la Star Trek, but it's kind of satirical, but it's also on a shoestring budget, but it's still very elaborate to the point where you can get a lot done in this movie, and it comes out really well. And that also goes for the Cartoon Man too.
Yeah.
Cartoon
Man was an even lower budget than Space People. Yeah.
and it still came out really well. So what was the creative process behind that and Space People? Like, what are those like? What was it like coming up with those ideas and having them go from just like a basic idea to the whole trilogy of like the Cartoon Man and Space People? Well, Space People is like 2 movies, but still.
Yeah, we could go further, but who knows? Yeah, well, I'll start. So with Cartoon Man, it started just, I had this idea, I was watching clips of like Roger Rabbit for inspiration for the film I did before that, and it reminded me of some joke article I'd read years earlier about a guy who was turning into a cartoon character, and I thought that would be a great idea for a short film, and I just happened to have the big white cartoon gloves in a bag of costumes. I'm like, I have those gloves. I could just put those on and be like, oh my god, this is happening to my head.
I do too. I think they're still in my closet somewhere, I think.
Yeah, so...
gotta dig out for those one day.
So I wrote this relatively simple, like 50-page script just based around the idea that this character was slowly turning into a cartoon, and I really just... as I was preparing to do it, I started watching like old cartoons, like Looney Tunes and Animaniacs and stuff, to get that sort of cartoony vibe in my head. And I'd see things like certain gags they would do, and I'm like, God, wouldn't it be cool to do that? Wouldn't it be? And when I was developing the Cartoon Man initially, I wasn't necessarily thinking it was going to have that much actual animation and special effects in it. Initially, it was just I was thinking I would do mostly physical effects, just make some cartoony looking props. But then I shot a little bit of test footage, and I mean, I think I was planning on having some just cartoony starbursts, explosions and stuff at least. So I started trying to put some of the effects I wanted to do into this test footage. But then I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, what if I was picking up a bomb and throwing it or something? Or what if my eyes turned into big cartoony googly eyes? And I just started drawing these things in a paintbrush app and putting them into the footage I'd shot, and it looked way better than I expected it to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It really works in the movie too, considering the context. Like you could have made it like totally realistic, like in The Mask, which I drew a lot of parallels to that movie to yours. But at the same time, the way you just still warp the reality of the concept, and like just instead of making it like highly realistic CGI, you just make it like all one big cartoon. I love that. That's what adds to the charm of the movie for me. Totally.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that was with absolutely no budget and having to do everything myself. Those were the only effects I was really capable of doing. But so because this test footage I mentioned came out so good, I ended up putting this whole cartoony battle scene in really just the last 10 minutes or so of the original movie. But I was so pleased with how that came out, and then again, like I mentioned, watching these old cartoons for inspiration, I was just like, I could do this and this and this. And so then that turned into 2 more movies that I wrote back to back. Return of the Cartoon Man and Journey of the Cartoon Man, as they ended up being called. And yeah, leading up to the third one, which was at least 75% green screen, us going through this whole cartoon world, and that took a ton of effort to get all that done. I was probably the highest ratio of post-production to the running time of a film, because the film is less than an hour long, but I spent months and months on drawing all those backgrounds and every prop and element, and yeah.
Yeah, and you did all the animation, right?
I did everything in it. Yeah, all the post-production. I mean, the other actors, they play their roles, but yeah, all the editing was an animation I did myself. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and for my viewers, once again, the third Cartoon Man movie, it takes place almost entirely in front of a green screen with drawn animated effects and everything, with drawn animated backgrounds, and it looks really good. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend these movies, and I also recommend Space People as well, which we can talk about next.
Yeah, because honestly, so I mentioned the suggestion, Rebecca made the suggestion of making a space movie based partly on the fact that I'd done the Cartoon Man films, and initially I was thinking like, it'd have to be the Cartoon Man in space, because like what was so great about the Cartoon Man was that I could do something with all these effects and have them all be these cheesy 2D drawings. You hear about like, it could be something like these big blockbuster movies where all the props and stuff they use are CGI and the environments, but I came up with this premise that allowed for them all to be these 2D drawings. But for Space People, I wasn't going to just do the same thing. So that was a whole different thing. That was thinking, how am I going to do this? I really had spent a lot of time. It's like, what are we going to just be in my garage and that'll be like a spaceship or something? Well, that's basically what we did. I basically just at first I'm thinking, I don't know, am I just going to put up aluminum foil and stuff? That's going to look really cheesy. Well, it did, but it worked. It came out well enough. Once
again, it totally adds to the charm of things too. Like it plays off as just like a really fun kind of 60s little B movie with like a little bit of 2016 like thrown into it too. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean it's something that I feel like almost wouldn't even work as well if it did have a huge budget. It would just kind of be like, it's a pretty good sci-fi comedy. But the fact it's stuff like the stuff where we go into Boston and walk around in our spacesuits. There's almost a sense of we actually went and did that. That I think adds to the whole thing.
Yeah, what was that like? Just going to Boston and like all your costumes and everything. Like you.
Yeah,
How was that?
that was an interesting experience. It's really that even before the suggestion of doing a space movie came up, I had this idea in my head that like, it'd be cool to film something in Boston because I'd done a ton of films in my house. I'd done the woods nearby, the local, public parks. I felt like I'd been using up all the nearby locations, and I live in the Boston area. I went to college in Boston, so kind of knew my way around. So I'm starting to think, oh, what could we do in Boston? And so then I start developing this space movie. I'm like, well, what if these space people, when they come to Earth, they land in Boston and end up walking around the streets of Boston, and we'll just be in these costumes, and they'll be completely ridiculous, but also kind of a lot of fun. And so, I asked all the actors who were going to be in it, so is this something you're okay with if we go into Boston and film some stuff? And everybody was like, yeah, sure. So we went and did it, and it was one of those things where it's like the whole time there's this sense of, I can't believe we're really doing this. We're in these ridiculous costumes. We're 4 or 5 of us in our silver spacesuits, and then we have Lady Gravitox, the villain, who's got this whole crazy outfit one of the days. And the crazy thing was the first day we shot in Boston, we weren't even the only ones on the Boston Common who were wearing costumes. There was some There was some convention or something. There were people dressed as like Disney characters and other characters and stuff. And then on the other end of the Common, some avant-garde fashion show started with these people in these really elaborate outfits, and yeah, we're there in our costumes. We'd have people come up to us, say, so what are you doing in all these costumes? And we're like, well, we're shooting a movie. I don't know about those people though, they're not with us. It was a crazy day.
Oh my god, that's perfect. I totally love that. And it works too. Like you totally got away with that.
Yeah, just I mean, I feel like there was a very guerrilla style to it. We'd have to just, all right, put the camera here, then we go over here, and then we just walk by. All right, move the camera around. I think at one point we left the camera and then walked across the street, and then I didn't even end up using that shot because we didn't get a good take of it. But it was, we'd have so many people coming up to us, taking pictures of us, and making jokes about what planet are you from, and illegal aliens and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you worked that into the movie too, because there's a couple shots where you're like taking selfies with random people.
The girl with the selfie who takes the selfie with us was someone who I got through an acting website to be an extra specifically. But then there's a person, like, we pet someone's dog. They were just people walking around who we.
Oh my god! Yeah, I love that shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very fun movie, and once again, it's on a very low budget, but it's still elaborate in the sense that there's a lot of stuff going on in one plot, and it pays off in the end, to the point where there's a sequel. Yeah. Obviously, one of my favorite parts of the movie is the scene where you find out that Vec Tempest is there. Well, it's actually like it's played off like a twist, and then it turns into another twist. So the twist is that he gets committed to a psychiatric ward where he's basically so he is convinced that the whole plot of the movie hasn't happened. He's just a normal guy who just went crazy after a breakup, and his friends just went along with it. And then it turns out that he was brainwashed. That's completely false. He is someone from space, and I love how you came up with that. That really blew my mind when I watched it. How'd you come up with that?
I mean, it was a variety of things. I mean, part of the whole origin of Space People was kind of the idea of doing like a live action Buzz Lightyear movie, because the Toy Story movies were a big part of my childhood, and the first two. And then when I'm coming up with a space movie, what would if I was going to do a space movie, what would I do? Like, Buzz Lightyear was the first thing I think of. And so I'm kind of thinking the whole arc in the first Toy Story is that he thinks he's a real space ranger, then learns he's a toy. So somehow doing that with humans led to this idea that, well, there had to be this scene where he where this character that I'm playing gets told, no, you're not really an alien. You're actually just a person who, went crazy or something. And I mean, part of it was based on me when I was in middle school, and I would go on these my own little crazy space adventures too. That I drew some inspiration from that. But and also I think I feel like I'd seen some movies that just, I don't know, either try to be ambiguous or try to, have all this crazy stuff happen, and then there's a twist that, oh no, it's not real. It's just this. It's all in someone's head. And I'm like, wouldn't it?
It was all just a dream.
And I just feel like I've seen movies that kind of start going in a certain direction, and I'm just like, I just want something crazy to happen. I want to just reveal that all the craziness is totally real. And I almost feel like I could have pulled it off better, just because the movie was so long. I almost couldn't milk the twist for as long as I almost wanted to. I almost wanted to milk it longer and really get people thinking, no, this whole thing wasn't real. As it is, it's really only about 10, 15 minutes that I'm able to do that before it's just like I have to go into the third act and reveal that, no, Lady Gravitox is trying to conquer Earth, and you're the only one who can say it. Who can stop her?
I love it. Yeah, that's what makes it so great about all these movies. You have just like this really creative mind, and a lot of things just come out, and like you do a lot more like really fun, like really zany kind of stuff than most people I find on YouTube, and that's what I love. I love zany and crazy, and it's great.
Yeah,
it's great that we have people who still It's great that we still have people embracing that. I love it.
Yeah. It's this stuff comes more naturally to me than anything else. I think the Cartoon Man and Space People movies are some of the easiest scripts for me to write. They just all kind of come to me, and much easier for me to write than something more realistic.
Awesome. So you have other projects outside of Smoking Bottle. Is that correct?
Smoking Bottle Entertainment. Yeah.
The smoking. Actually, how did you come up with that name?
Yeah, so going back to I said a lot of the early films I did were projects for classes in high school, and one of them, I think the last one I did was in my I think it was my junior year of high school for my U.S. history class. They assigned this research project about America in the Prohibition era. So this was the first like high school video project where I had actual editing software, so I really went all out. I made this movie that was a half hour long and had a whole narrative to it. It was this like film noir spoof, and the name, so I just gave it the name The Smoking Bottle. It begins with it's the Prohibition era. Someone finds an empty beer bottle, and it's, what is this bottle? So it's like smoking gun, smoking bottle, and that was like the best movie I'd made up to that point. And even all through college, I never made another movie that I liked as much as that one. I'd always look back at that for about 5 or 6 years or so and be like, I want to make more movies like this one. This was so much fun. It really has my voice in it. And so when I finally was doing the Dolchemok tapes, this found footage film I mentioned, I'm like, all right, I got to have some kind of opening titles, something Entertainment Pictures Productions presents, and I thought of a few things. I'm like, no, Smoking Bottle Entertainment, because there was that movie was at that time the model that I wanted all my other films to aspire to, and I think within just a few months I started surpassing it once I created. I think probably Cartoon Man was the first film that I did where I'm like, okay, this is better than Smoking Bottle actually. But yeah,
and rightfully so, might I add.
Yeah.
And another thing I wanted to point out from your movies is you have an Easter egg in every one of them.
Right.
The glove.
The glove.
Which if you go to the Smoking Bottle Facebook page, it basically shows you every instance of the glove just showing up in the movie. How did you come up with that Easter egg?
It kind of developed by accident, really. Back in in the early high school films leading up to The Smoking Bottle, I had very limited costume options. I wasn't at the point where like even Space People where I would spend money on cheap costumes. It was just whatever I could find around the house. So one of the things I'd always just have on hand was this one left-handed glove. So at some point, I think I almost just realized after the fact, in all these movies I'd make, at some point, one of the several characters I played would always be wearing this one glove. So it kind of became an inside joke I had with myself. I don't even think I really ever talked about it to anyone else. But when I, then years later, when I started doing the Smoking Bottle Entertainment films, it was just like that glove has to be in all of them. So I'd always make a point of sticking it in somewhere. And sometimes I'd forget, like with Lights, Camera, Terror, the short that I did this past fall, I had the glove with me on set the whole time, but completely forgot to put it in anywhere. So then I ended up green screening it in after the fact. So it just like blows by in the wind at one point.
That's awesome. It's your version of the hidden Mickey. It's perfect.
Yeah, like that.
All right. So as I was saying earlier, you have other projects outside of the Smoking Bottle.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about those?
Yeah. Well, like Paragods is probably the most substantial of those. Yeah. So I worked, like I said, I worked on some other local New England productions when I was starting out. Then once I really got into the Cartoon Man and stuff, I had a couple years where I was mostly focusing on my own stuff. But then, at a certain point, it was once I started meeting more and more actors, casting more actors in my films, they would be doing other projects around the area. And so they'd, invite me, hey, this project needs some help. Are you available? So yeah, that was, Mike Weiner was this one guy who he had been in Suburban Spies and Revenge of the Animals, a couple of the films I'd done. And then he was involved with this web series, Paragods. It's this, sort of mockumentary series about EMTs and firefighters in New Hampshire. And, he was talking about it a lot when we were on set for Revenge of the Animals. And then right around the time we wrapped, he, just messaged me on Facebook, I think, saying, hey, Paragods is shooting this weekend. They need help with crew, and we need a few extras. Are you available? And yeah, I was free that day, so I went up to their fire station that they shot at. And yeah, I helped with the camera, helped with sound. I did a small cameo in one scene, and yeah, and I had a lot of fun. It was one of the first times I was working on a project outside of my own films where I really felt like, hey, I really know what I'm doing, because by then I'd had years of experience doing my own films.
I know, that is such a good feeling.
Yeah.
What episode was your cameo?
My first cameo was it was midway through season 2. I think it was like the 4th episode of season 2, because it's like 6 episodes per season. I think it was 204 was my first cameo, and then I ended up helping out on the episode after that, for the rest of season 2. And then Sean Allen, the producer creator of Paragods, he mentioned to me, hey, if you're doing any other films, let me know, because I'll help out. And so then I did Space People, the first Space People, the summer after that. And so Sean came and he helped out with the camera for the first couple days. And then when that was done, he came to a screening I had at my house for some of the cast and crew. And the 3rd season of Paragods was in development at that time. So based on my performance as Space Squad Captain Beck Tempest, he kind of came up with this character of the acting chief of the fire station, because the 2nd season had ended with his character, Sean's character, was the chief of the department, but he got fired at the end of season 2, and so then he came up with this character that I ended up playing, who was his temporary replacement, who comes in for what ended up being season 3 and 4, and then still staying on in another position for season 5, which just started this past weekend, and will continue going up on YouTube for every Sunday night for the next few weeks.
And that's also the last season.
It's the final season. Paragods is now in its final season.
Okay, cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So, do you play the same character as you did in the cameo, or?
In theory, I could. There's nothing in it that says I couldn't be the same guy who was in this other. I think I actually made 2 cameo appearances. There was one at the very, very beginning of season 3, and I think actually I then, in the 2nd episode of season 3, is the first episode where I officially play my character, and I kind of acknowledged the episode before that, even though it wasn't necessarily written as the same character in the first place. But yeah,
that's cool. I like
yeah,
that.
and that's been great because Paragods, there's a bunch of other people in it who are in like the Space People films and other projects around New England. It's gone on for so long, and the format allows for a lot of people to make cameos and stuff, so it's something that a lot of people in the New England film area, in the film and acting community, have been a part of.
And that's another cool thing about your movies is that a lot of the people who've shown up in like say like the Cartoon Man or Revenge of the Animals or Suburban Spies, they show up in like Space People or any other movie that you're doing or Lights Camera Terror or Choirwood. Like
Yeah,
that's what I like about that.
yeah,
Have you met those people through just like doing other projects and stuff like that?
yeah. I mean, it started out. I The first few films I would have casting calls. There were like there's the NewEnglandFilm.com website where it's just local listings for independent films that are seeking cast and crew. So I'd audition people through that, and I would work with them. And then anytime I'd be starting a new project, I'd email everybody who was on the previous one, hey, I'm doing another movie, who wants in, and I'd bring back whoever wanted to come back, and then I'd hold another round of auditions to fill all the additional roles that I couldn't fill with people from previous films. And so over the years, my network just got bigger and bigger, and I haven't really even done a full-on casting call in the past few years because I just know so many people now. And there have been other times when I'll be on projects like Paragods and other things like that where I'll meet someone who will say to me, oh, hey, if you're ever looking for somebody, I'd love to work with you. And if the timing works out that I just happen to be casting something, sometimes, I've been able to cast people through things like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great that you have those resources because it
Yeah,
really
no, and it helps.
works out in
Yeah.
the end. Because like these are some really, like besides you, who's also really talented. These are like really everyone in these casts are all talented.
Yeah, they are. It's a great
And
people.
they really put a lot of dedication into these roles, and you put a lot of dedication into your roles and what you write and everything, and how you direct it, how you edit it, and that's great. It just shows how much love and care is put into each of your movies, and it's great.
Yeah.
Especially if you love your movies enough to put Easter eggs in them.
Yeah, and there's more than just the glove. I mean, some of them are more intentional than others. Sometimes it's intentionally referencing something. Other times it's just I have no budget and I have to keep reusing the same props and stuff in the background. I mean, I think there's just if you look at like Cartoon Man and Space People, there are things that are just in the background that never even get acknowledged, but they're just to dress the sets. I'll use the same things over and over.
I never noticed that at first, even like through like past rewatches. What kind of other Easter eggs are there?
I'm almost thinking I might make an annual thing every Easter of posting on the Smoking Bottle Facebook page because it's hard to even think of them offhand.
You should.
Yeah.
It'd be really
because
cool
I
if
know
you did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they're in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. And one more thing I love about your movies, you have a good sense of humor, as we were talking about in the last conversation we had. Because I, brought up all the jokes in the Cartoon Man I liked and everything, like the whole coupon gag, which is funny, and like you. And
that's something I didn't even remember when you mentioned it. It's like, oh, the Crouton coupon. Yeah, it's like that's not even something I think of as being one of the funnier things in it. But yeah, it's like you never know what's gonna strike a chord with somebody.
Where do you come up with your jokes for these movies?
I don't know how.
So do you think of like plot first and then movie? I mean, plot first and then jokes, or
yeah, typically I think I'll have the plot in my head, and then for jokes I'll almost just be sitting down and start typing, and they'll just come to me. It's like almost like improv, but I don't know. Or sometimes it varies. I mean, I'll be thinking about when I'm writing a script, I'll have it in my head constantly. So certain things I come up with right away, and then other things just come to me as I'm typing.
Oh, cool. I like that. Okay, so let's talk about the future of Smoking Bottle. Can you talk about your upcoming projects, Choirwood and Lights Camera Terror?
Okay, well, which one do you want to talk about first? Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Choirwood first.
Choirwood,
actually.
yeah. Choirwood.
So how did that get started?
Okay.
Where'd that idea come from?
So Choirwood, for those who don't know, is a feature-length musical film full of original songs that people are singing, and that the idea of doing a musical for me goes way back to before there was such a thing as Smoking Bottle Entertainment. I did a lot of theater in high school because there was no film program or anything. That was the only real like creative outlet they had. But they would do it. My high school would do a musical every year, and because I constantly, like I said, even when I was younger, I'd always have movies in my head. I kind of started formulating this idea of a musical based on the productions of the musicals we did. So then at a certain point when I was in college, I ended up writing this script. It was called The Phantom of the High School Musical. And I wrote lyrics for a bunch of songs, and it was a lot of fun to write. And then in the years immediately after that, I kind of started thinking, when I wrote this, I wasn't thinking this is something I would do, but God, that would be fun to make a musical. That would be so cool to stage these musical numbers and have a film with all this music in it. And at the time, I hadn't really started working on any films. I was still finishing up college. I just wasn't in a position to make any sort of large-scale feature film at that time, and so it just wasn't something that ever went forward. And eventually, it was something that I just reached the point where this particular film that particular script wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do. But so flash forward to the end of production on Space People 2. I was doing scenes with my character and Lady Gravitox, the villain of Space People, so people always say that musicals aren't realistic because nobody just goes around bursting into song. But if you've ever been around theater people, certain people do spontaneously burst into song a lot. So Hannah Heckman McKenna, the actress who plays Lady Gravitox, she'd just be singing stuff from Avenue Q and other musicals that she had performed in, and so myself and her and Ribbon Girl Hart, who helped with a lot of her Lady Gravitox hair and makeup and costumes, we were just somehow got to talking about musicals just from the way they would be singing on set, and this thought of, wouldn't it be great if we did a musical? And Hannah's like, yeah, well, I'm an experienced singer, and I mentioned I actually wrote a musical years ago. I don't really want to do that one, but I enjoyed writing it. I'd love to write another one. And earlier that year, Ribbon Girl and I had done a 48-hour film project, and she brought on this guy, Brian Niedermeyer, to write the score for that. And when we went to the screening for that, the thought of musicals kind of came up. So it was kind of this thought that this is something we all have an interest in. I mean, I think some of them had tried writing their own musical years earlier too. So it was something we all had kind of had a thing that we wanted to do at some point, and we came together and it was just like, okay, we can actually do this, because at that point I'd made several feature films, and also I knew I did the first two Space People movies back to back, and coming to the end of Space People 2, I knew that while I was open to the idea of doing a third Space People at some point, I didn't want to do one right away. I wanted to move on and do something different. But I also wanted to do something that was exciting and challenging and different. And so the prospect of doing a musical, which was something I had an interest in doing years earlier, was really exciting. And so right after Space People 2 had its premiere, and that was fully over with, the four of us, myself, Hannah, Ribbon Girl, and Brian, just got in a Facebook chat and started throwing around ideas. And Hannah mentioned that she had some experience in mental institutions earlier in her life, some good experiences, some bad, that she thought could make a decent premise for a musical, and everyone kind of agreed, yeah, that sounds like it could totally work. And so from that, we got together and we outlined the whole story of this mental hospital that's going relatively well until this sadistic doctor comes in and takes over and everything starts going downhill. And so then once we had it outlined, I wrote a screenplay and I wrote all the lyrics into it. In our outlining, we came up with a few ideas for songs, and so I try to work those in, and sometimes I just be writing and be like, there should be a song here, and have that. And so then I sent the script to everybody, and so then, and so then the music got composed and, rehearsed and then recorded, and all over several months, and then it took us 6 months to shoot the whole thing, and then over a year after that, just with all the music being finished. It's been a long process. It's been over 2 years now that it's been going.
Wow, yeah, I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I can't believe it. It's the longest I've ever worked on any individual project, I have to say.
It's gonna be worth the wait. I know
sure
that.
Hope so. Yeah.
All right, sweet. So how about Lights Camera Terror? How'd that come about?
Lights, Camera, Terror was loosely based on, well, it was a script that I wrote like 8 years or so early before I ended up shooting it. One of the films I came up with this script. It was actually similar to the first musical I wrote, where it was inspired by the experience of working on this low-budget horror movie, early in my career, right after I finished school. I came up with this script about this crew that's shooting a horror movie with a director who's going crazy, but they're in a house that's actually haunted, so stuff starts going badly, people start dying, and it was something that I was legitimately looking to do, but just never got around to. And so then really what happened was, with Quirewood, it reached the point where the music was being finished. So going back to Quirewood for a second, we recorded all of the actors and their vocals before we shot the film. But we would just have these very basic, stripped down versions of the songs where it would just be the vocals and a piano or some other virtual instrument accompanying them that we would play back on set and they would sing along to. So then it was after the whole thing that was shot was that Brian, our music director, and Renee Bergeron, who was initially just one of our actors, but who had was also a musician with her own recording studio and lots of equipment. So she really came on and took an active role in helping it. So after we finished production, it was really up to them to actually put the full orchestration into all these songs and compose a whole score. So that ended up taking months and months, and really ultimately over a year. And so at a certain point, I realized I have a lot of time where I'm not going to really have anything to do on this film. So I might as well get started on something else. And it was kind of late last year. So, it was kind of late summer. I was thinking I don't really have time to do a full feature, but I could probably fit in a short film. And I was so I started actually talking to Rebecca Howland, who had been in several of the Space People, Cartoon Man, and so forth. And I had first met her on the horror movie that the script was based on, and she had read the script back when I first wrote it, and she had really wanted to do it, but it didn't come together. So I was talking to her, and she mentioned, that script you wrote, it was so funny. I'd love to do that someday. And I almost thought it was, it's too much. It's too in-jokey. The script is all just in-jokes that only people who are worked on that film would even get. But then I look back at it, and it's like, no, this is actually really funny. This would be a really fun film to do. And so, so I did that. I went ahead and made it last fall. And the great thing about that was, other than one scene, we got the whole thing done in one weekend, because these Revenge of the Animals, Space People, Quirewood would all just go on and on because they were feature length. But the great thing with even Cartoon Man, I remember, kind of took a while to get finished. But so that was the fun part about Lights, Camera, Terror, was it just aside from the opening scene is at a separate location, so I shot that the weekend before we did most of it, but the majority of it was all done in one weekend, and it just gets Sunday night, and it's like, that's it, we're done. We don't have to.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, because usually it's like, okay, well, we're done for this weekend, but we didn't get around to this scene, or this scene, so now we're going to have to find time to get these people together and do those scenes. And yeah, that's how it is on the feature-length projects most of the time, and it just, the end of production winds up getting pushed further and further out. I'm used to it at this point. I've done so many, I go in expecting it, but then somehow that's just
how it is.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. All right, so what's next for the future for you and for Smoking Bottle? Like after these movies, like, do you have any plans?
I keep meaning to come up with something. Something will come soon. I'm Paragods is in its last season, so I'm actually helping edit the last episode of that. So that's been taking up a lot of my time. And Quirewood is being finalized. I mean, the music's being mastered now, so I should get the final versions of those hopefully soon, and then that'll be wrapping up. So it's like, hey, I've had all this on my plate. It's been hard to get started on anything else, but I'm sure within the next couple months I'll be starting something, whether that's something original or something, you never know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Are you going to be working on any other projects like outside of Smoking Bottle, or?
I do have one. It's with a lot of the same people who were involved with the Cartoon Man. Actually, it's
Ooh.
yeah, something about the comedian Sam Kinison, the guy who played Oswald Straczynski the Dennis Worth, who he was the arch villain of Journey of the Cartoon Man. It was his comedy inspiration, so he asked me to, help him produce this, it's kind of almost a short film, almost done like a trailer, but not for the movie that's actually going to be made that he's been wanting to get off the ground. And yeah, I hadn't.
Oh, so it's sort of like
Yeah, kind of a.
so it's sort of like an autobiography
Yeah,
then.
but it's yeah, and he's someone who I haven't seen much of since the Cartoon Man, but he, reached out for this, and a few of the other actors in that I think are going to be part of that too.
That's good. It's another really good example of just using your resources and the people and places around you, which is,
Yeah,
I think is a very good part of filmmaking, especially indie filmmaking.
Yeah, really, I think the films have got better because I've been able to build up a network. Like Lights, Camera, Terror, I was able to get locations for that because people I'd worked with over and over were able to offer them up. Like, we shot most of it at this house in New Hampshire that was, the home of Demetra Papadinus, who'd been in Suburban Spies, Revenge of the Animals, both Space Peoples. I put out that I was looking for locations. She offered her house, and we shot there, and were able to get it done. And so it's
totally.
Yeah, it's stuff like that that's made these films better.
Yeah. So is that the what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is like just starting out with filmmaking? Then
I don't know what advice to give. It's like, really, I feel like it's hard to give people advice because I feel like when I was starting out, I'd almost had this idea in my head that, I know better than what these people are telling me. Like, I'd be in college and there'd be people saying like, well, this is how the industry works. This is how you have to do things. And, at the time, part of it was just technology was advancing right around that time. I'm thinking, I don't need to listen to this. And it's like, when you get to the point where you've had some experience, you kind of realize they were right, but I was right, and it's somehow or another I was gonna go blaze my own trail no matter what happened, because I don't know, it's like I had to try to make films the way I wanted to, because I don't know. Everyone. I think everyone. I'm sorry. I'm going all over the place with this right now.
You're fine.
Yeah.
So am I.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's like I think everyone has their own way of doing things, and I think that's a lot of times people will try to act like their way of doing things is the only way of doing things. But I've just kind of tried to. I've always been like, okay, I know how I work. I know what conditions. I don't. It helps that I started small too. That I started with small things with just a few actors. It's just once I got I got comfortable. But yeah, it's just I think find what works for you. I think that's what I did. I just found a way of doing it that works for me, and I just kept rolling with it and just making bigger and bigger productions.
Yeah, that's totally what counts. Because if you find your way of working with things, like, it doesn't matter what medium you're doing. Like, if you're like just filmmaking, or if you're a musician like I am, or if you're just like writing, like a book or whatever, just work with what you have and find your own way to do it.
Yeah, because I think there are
like that's perfect. That's very good advice.
Yeah, once I in a roundabout way got to that, but yeah, that's what I've found is I just kind of and if you make mistakes, you just learn from them. If something doesn't work out. Because it's
all right.
Yeah,
I like it. Awesome. All right. Well, Adam, thanks so much for being a guest today. Where can we see your movies?
Well, you can see I think most everything up through Revenge of the Animals on YouTube, and then Space People 1 and 2 are both available on Amazon Prime. Yeah, and then Lights, Camera, Terror is currently showing at festivals, mostly around New England, but then that'll be put up somewhere, and then Quirewood should be premiering sometime soon.
Is that going to be on Amazon Prime as well?
I mean, I don't know. It's both. I'm sure we'll have a premiere. We'll be sending that to festivals, and it'll be something we figure out as we go. Right now, we're just focused on getting it done right now.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to see how that plays out. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Adam.
Yeah. Thank you.
All